Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Jesperson. I'm with the Tamarisk Coalition, and I will be coordinating the webinar today. Thank you so much for joining us. The way that this will work is that we will have the presentations take place first, and that should take about 60 minutes or so. And Tamarisk Coalition staff will be giving the presentations. And then after that, we'll have an open Q&A with the Colorado Water Conservation Board staff helping to answer any questions. So I will give you instructions as to how to participate at that point. And I want to ensure that we stay on schedule, so I'll move forward momentarily. Let's see. For those who just joined the call, we're going to get started momentarily here. And just so you know, all of you are currently muted, and we'll allow for questions at the end after the presentations have taken place. So if you have questions, please feel free to write them down, and we'll hopefully be able to get through all of those. So this webinar is focused on the Invasive Phreatophyte Control Program, and we wanted to take this opportunity to provide you with an overview of the guidance, especially because there have been a few changes since previous programs. And so we're going to do our best to cover the main points included in the RFP and required in the application process, and then cover the various technical assistance services that the Tamarisk Coalition can offer during the application period. So I'll go ahead and get started. Wanted to kick it off with a quick overview of the basic information and deadlines and so forth. The grant is due November 13th, and the funding level that applicants can apply for, the range is between $10,000 and $300,000. Eligible applicants include the State of Colorado departments and agencies, local governments, conservation and water conservancy districts, weed management districts, established nonprofit organizations, watershed coalitions, private individuals, and Colorado's 2U tribes. So that's a good range of eligible applicants. The tasks that will be built into the application should be proposed to take place between the dates of February 1st, 2016 and June 30th, 2018. So it's about an 18-month period in which the proposed tasks and scope of work must be completed. Applications should conform to the specifications in the RFP, that is minimum 11 points. There should be margins that are 1 inch maximum, and the narrative should be no more than 5 pages, excluding summary sheet maps and attachments. I wanted to call out your attention to the fact that there is a separate call for applications through the Colorado Youth Corps Association for youth corps within the state of Colorado to submit applications to CYCA so that CYCA can bundle these applications into a single application that will go then to the Colorado Water Conservation Board. So hopefully that's not too confusing, but this is kind of a call within a call for applications. Those applications are due to CYCA on November 3rd, and accredited youth corps organizations in Colorado are eligible to send their applications through that process. And there is some guidance available online, and if you have questions about how to participate in that process, feel free to email me after this webinar, and I can get you that guidance. A couple of changes from the past IPCP grant programs I think are worth calling out. This particular RFP allows for, and grant application process allows for requests that are up to $300,000, which is more than previous periods, which have allowed up to $100,000. For this application, it is required that you obtain a letter of support from your local basin roundtable. So please ensure that you have that. That is a statutory requirement, and you'll want to make sure that that's in place to have a complete application. Match requirements, you need only 25% of match this time around as opposed to 50%. Half of that match must be a cash match and the other half must be in kind. So you can't have a 25% of in-kind match exclusively. There must be some dollars that are brought to the table from other grant programs or other funding streams. So that's an important distinction to make. Also, this time around, state agencies and private landowners are eligible to apply, whereas in the past they were not. Another change is that some of the multi-objective components of this project can include reduced groundwater consumption, enhanced native habitat for current or prospective ESA-listed species, removal of ornamental invasive phreatophyte populations or individuals, and protection of water quality by complying with the forestry BMPs to protect water quality in Colorado 2010 document. Another important consideration to keep in mind is that if you are participating in watershed-wide restoration activities and you want to bundle multiple projects, those projects should be bundled at a scale of no less than HUC 8 boundaries. So if you have projects that are outside of a HUC 8 level of watershed, then you will need to apply for those separately. And if you have questions about kind of how that works, that would be a good question to ask of Chris or Eric, our CWCB representative. And I'm going to, from here, transition over to have Shannon Hatch, one of our restoration ecologists, take over. Shannon, if you would, please press *6.
Hi, so I'm just going to go over some of the components that need to be included in the grant application. And these are all listed in the guidance and the application, but I just wanted to provide some examples for reference. So each grant application needs to include a detailed map of the project that shows all the water courses, all the major landowners, infested areas, and then the areas that are going to be treated. And that needs to be at a scale that's suitable for your grant application. And polygon maps are really recommended, and eventually would like to compile all those polygons into some overall mapping efforts so that the state can better display what's been done throughout the state. So here's just two examples, one on a larger scale that I borrowed from Tina Booten, and then another one showing a small example of a treatment area on the Dolores River. You'll also need to describe the removal methods that you'll be using on your treatment site. So they can include mechanical, hand treatment, and used in conjunction with herbicide, and just describe what those different methods are going to be on each site. You'll need to describe the objectives. Like Kristen mentioned earlier, a lot of these projects have multi-objectives, and just be sure that you touch on all of those. It's very important to demonstrate the use of integrated pest management strategies. This is a component of the grant that's weighted pretty heavily. It's one of the first questions in the overall criteria for the grant. You'll also need to indicate how the proposed work is not duplicative of other projects, so describe how your work fits within the broader picture of your watershed or watersheds that you're working in. And then you'll also need to mention how your projects consider the different permitting procedures that you need to go through, as well as tax requirements if you're limited by Tabor, for example. Each grant will need to describe the restoration and revegetation plan for your site. You'll need to talk about whether you're doing cottonwood pole plantings or willow plantings, grass seedings, for example, maybe where you're going to get those plants and your timeline for those plantings. And then you also need to indicate how those approaches will vary on different sites. So if you've got an area that's subject to erosion, you'll need to talk about how you're addressing that within the grant. Likewise, if you're really disconnected from the floodplain and don't receive flooding on a regular basis, you'll need to talk about how your revegetation plan will address the survivability of your plants. If you are looking at passive revegetation, you also need to talk about why you think that's a good fit for this project. Are there a lot of native plants in the area that will repopulate that area? Do you have natural overbank flooding? Just kind of address some of those topics as to why you think you'll achieve your objectives for your site. These are some example objectives from the Purgatory River Watershed Riparian Rehabilitation Project, which was funded by IPCP a couple years ago. You can see that they have very specific objectives to reduce their non-native woody and secondary invasive plant species by 50% over a particular time frame. They're also looking at improving native vegetation cover over a time frame, and then they're assisting the county with their creation of their weed management cooperative plan. So just be very specific in what you're trying to achieve, and then this will help you develop your overall monitoring and maintenance goals as well. The monitoring of each project must continue 5 years after the project is completed, and that's really something important to note, especially if you're working with a bunch of different partners. You want to make sure you have those plans for monitoring in effect. An annual letter is required to CWCB on an annual basis to describe the monitoring efforts. What is great about this grant is that the monitoring costs can be built in and counted as match within the project budget, and there does need to be a line item to spell this out. And like I mentioned on the last slide, you'll want to link your monitoring activities back to those project objectives to show that you are indeed achieving the goals you set out to achieve. In the grant, you'll also need to list the lead project sponsors and the other partners that are participating on this grant. You'll need letters of support from them. You'll need to outline your accomplishments within the watershed, and then describe any other planning documents that have helped guide your work. If you have an overall watershed plan or weed management plan that your agency uses, be sure to call that out. And then it's also required to list out the staff that will be dedicated to this project, and that includes all paid staff and then the contractors and youth corps and other people you're working with. And then resumes, just brief resumes from what I understand, are required for the main project team. Outreach is a really important component of this grant. The Tamarisk Coalition has been working with past IPCP recipients to get the word out about what they're doing in their watersheds. Below on the screen is an example of an article that we helped promote from Lakewood, and then we've been writing little blurbs to put out on Facebook and on our website as well. And so we're really encouraging people to get the word out, whether that be through articles or through field trips or different training events. And we can certainly help out with that as well. As you've seen in the grant application, you're also required to fill out a scope of work. And this is just an example of a scope of work, again, from the Purgatory River. And you can see that they've listed out the description of what they're trying to achieve, the methods they'll be using, and so they talk about their different integrated pest management strategies, and then the deliverables that they'll be providing. And the Tamarisk Coalition has linked to several grant applications on our website, so you can take a more in-depth look at some of these scopes of work that have been successful for other participants over the last couple of years of the IPCP program. Briefly wanted to mention that all proposals will be reviewed in collaboration with the Colorado Department of Agriculture to make sure that they are in compliance or working closely in areas where biocontrol agents are being utilized. And I don't know that there necessarily should be avoided per se, but that biocontrol agents are taken into consideration as an overall integrated pest management strategy. There we've got the picture of the Tamarisk leaf beetle. Obviously, a lot of people are using that to help control resprouts, for example. So just kind of knowing where those agents are located and where they might be most effective. Briefly going to talk about the budget requirements and timeline. As Kristen mentioned earlier, there is a match requirement which is reduced by half since the last IPCP grant. 25% match of the total project cost is required, not the ask to CWCB. And obviously more match is encouraged, and those projects could potentially rank out higher. Both in-kind services and cash contributions can be counted towards match. Half of the 25% match, so 12.5% needs to be cash, and the other half needs to be in-kind. So eligible in-kind can include paid staff that are working on the project, indirect or direct fringe benefits, and volunteer time. However, operating expenses are not covered. As I mentioned before, CWCB will only cover 75% of the total project costs, and total state funding cannot exceed 87.5%. So you need to take that all into consideration as you're calculating your match and your total contributions. And then on your grant application, just indicate whether you've secured that funding or whether it's pending. You can count work that's been accomplished prior to the purchase order being obtained, and you can count that up to a 6-month period prior to the application deadline of November 13th. You'll need to build a budget around a realistic schedule, and like Kristen mentioned, you need to have everything completed by June 30th, 2018. So just make sure that all your activities and those funding amounts line up accordingly. All the work that's funded by CWCB must be completed by that date. However, if there's other activities that are associated with the grant, they could potentially extend beyond that due date. So this is just an example of a budget and a timeline, and again, you can view other ones at our website. Kristen just put a very simple budget together to show some of the steps you might list, including removing woody invasives, your secondary weed treatment, revegetation, and monitoring, and then just making sure all those start and completion dates are within the appropriate time frame. List out your cash funds and your in-kind, and then total those out. And I guess we'd also want to indicate whether those are secured or pending funds on the budget and timeline. Other requirements include letters of support from the other partners you're working with, people who are making financial contributions, and then like Kristen mentioned, you'll want to get in contact with your appropriate Basin Roundtable chair to obtain a letter of support from them. And then still photos of the project area are also required to show the work that you're intending to do.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take over for the last number of slides. My name is Rusty Lloyd. I'm the program manager for the Tamarisk Coalition, and we'll walk through some of the technical assistance that we're going to provide not only applicants but grantees once the decisions have been made, what projects are being set. So first off, the Tamarisk Coalition has been engaged in this process to provide technical resources to not only applicants but the grantees. We're currently reviewing the guidance document and the application, or at least aspects of it. But all this information is on both the TC's website and CWCB's website, so you can always reference those two. The draft app, we want to provide a number of services. One of the services that we want to help people is be able to access this funding, so we're able to provide some application review services, and we want to do that between August 12th and August 25th. So if you guys need us to help review some of your applications, please get those to us no later than October 25th, and then we can provide input on the technical aspects of it and get you feedback, so it'll bolster your application. TC can, sorry, I'm just trying to get the slides up. Move on to the next one here. So TC, what we'd like to do is the major plan components is review some of those with applicants, help increase the likelihood of getting funding, help define goals and objectives of the project, a lot of what Shannon and Kristen have already reviewed, but site prioritization and mapping, the removal methods and implementation, the methods, techniques, secondary weeds, monitoring, and funding. We just want to make sure these components really dovetail well with each other, and so it's the likelihood that you'll have not only a successful application, but a successful grant in the end. So going into a little more of the technical aspects of it, removal techniques, you know, there's a lot of different techniques out there. There's as many different techniques as there is sites, so we want to help people with selecting the right tool for the right project on the right site. You know, we mentioned integrated pest management. We want people to take that into account. And so how are you going to make those decisions depending on the accessibility, how many weeds there are to remove, what are local capabilities of contractors, all those things. And so some of the removal methods, you know, we can help guide you to as good information as we can get with mechanical and hand and chemical treatments, as well as the biological control. John, there we go. Revegetation techniques. You know, remember that removal of invasive species is not the goal here. We want healthier, more vibrant, resilient systems in Colorado. So revegetation is going to be a big component of it, and plant selection, steering people towards people that have plant stock, and the vendors. We can recommend good, successful vendors. The techniques, again, there's as many different planting techniques as there is sites, so we can help people with some of the do's and don'ts of planting. And then at some point when later on, we can help with demonstrations and trainings, events across the state, so people can actually take the information and apply that to their sites and their projects. The monitoring and maintenance aspects of it, it's a big one. We want to make sure that these projects are successful, so monitoring and maintenance are always a consideration. And we want to assist people in developing a monitoring plan based on those project objectives that Shannon mentioned. They need to be linked. Assist with the developing of the protocols. We want to scale the protocols to the abilities and the capabilities of the applicants. You know, cost-effective, low-impact monitoring protocols that maybe a private landowner needs versus maybe more intense monitoring protocols with agency people. And so we can help train on those different kind of scaled monitoring protocols and techniques. And then we want to provide guidance on who to consult about some of these things. The Colorado Department of Agriculture and county weed managers that have a lot of these a lot of this expertise, so we'll connect people in that sense. The mapping resources, as Shannon mentioned, ideally we'd like to have these mapping resources kind of compiled so we can see the impact of this funding stream. And some of those resources are involved with where the presence and absence of the Tamarisk leaf beetle are across the state of Colorado. Tamarisk Coalition has a lot of that information internally. As far as the weed mapping, the listed A, B, and C and watch species for the state of Colorado, the Colorado Department of Agriculture's website, and connection with a lot of the county weed managers are well tapped into all that information. And we want to provide the assistance to some of the mapping. Some people might not have good technological resources for mapping, so we're going to be available to grantees to help them compile all that information. Funding assistance. We want, mentioned earlier, help putting together an appropriate budget. There's some resources that we have available to people. One, we have a riparian restoration cost calculator. That it's a very simple kind of cost calculator that you can put inputs in, the removal, the revegetation, and the maintenance costs into this calculator, and it provides a per acre cost of what these restoration activities might come to, and so that's available on our website, so people can actually have a good sense of what their restoration project might cost. We want to provide the assistance in identifying and calculating the match, which is a big requirement for the grant. And then helping think through long-term funding. The reality is some of these restoration projects are going to span well beyond the length of this funding, and so we want to help provide additional funding resources to grantees and the people that are doing this work that go beyond the scope and the length of time of this funding. So we're going to help steer people towards alternate funding sources. And the last bullet point kind of speaks to that is the other potential funding streams that need cost covered. So with that, again, Tamarisk Coalition is engaged in the process to help with a lot of the technical aspects of this. And on this slide, on the right side, Tamarisk Coalition, myself, Shannon, Julie, Ben, and Kristen, we all provide different expertise in different aspects of the grant. And so please don't hesitate to call us. You can go to our website at www.tamariskcoalition.org. And then the contacts on the Colorado Water Conservation Board side are Chris Sturm and Eric Skye, which that's their contact information as well. So I'll turn it back over to Kristen.
Thank you, Rusty and Shannon. So just a couple reminders. We will have a recording of this webinar available after we have concluded today, so you can access this information if you need to reference something that was discussed again. And also we will, I can send out the guidance that we've developed where we're referencing some of the core materials that have some of these best management practices, some of the sample applications, and the cost calculator. So if you have questions about how to access those resources, you can email me, and I will send those to you. My email is here on this page. So that took a little bit less time than expected, which is not a bad thing. So we are prepared to begin our Q&A session with we can have Tamarisk Coalition staff available, and Chris Sturm and Eric Skye, if you would push *6 so that you can be unmuted and answer any questions that our attendees might have. If you're interested in asking a question, you'll need to also press *6. I do not have a way to stage those questions, so we'll need to kind of try as a group to not talk over each other. And hopefully can get a few questions answered. If you feel like if you don't have a chance to have your question asked over the phone, then you can type it into the chat box. Chris and Eric, are you there?
Yep, we're here.
Okay, great. So let's see, are there any questions from the group?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Pam Motley from the Uncompahgre Partnership, and I had two questions. Say first that the UP is thinking of submitting a grant, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit. But my two questions are, one, can we submit a grant that would treat invasives on federal lands, on public lands? We're thinking of doing a treatment on BLM lands. So that's my first question. And then my second question is, can any of the match, either the actual money match or the in-kind match, can it be federal dollars?
That's the easy one, yes and yes. We can do work on federal lands, and we prefer the feds to have some money in the project.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Thank you. If you would, Pamela, press *6 so that you're remuted. That would be great.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And then do we have any other questions from our attendees? If so, please press *6.
Yeah, this is Justin with Montrose County.
Great. Hi, Justin.
Hi. I was looking at some of the dollar matches and things like that associated with the grant, and I noticed that it can go up to $300,000 can be funded. I think I could easily put that $300,000 to good use, but is there kind of a magic number for that? Is funding at the upper end of that amount something you guys are going to be supportive of, or is there another amount that you prefer?
We have $2 million to spend. I want to try and get it all out. That's my thought.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
we don't, usually we have like an average amount that we could recommend, but since we have $2 million in a very short timeline, and that was handed to us by the General Assembly this year, we're looking to get most, if not all, of this out in this grant cycle. That said, if it's a very competitive grant program with a lot of good applications, we're going to have to look at partial funding. So sometimes it's helpful to, in your application, to do things in phases, or at least demonstrate ways where we could fund a project without the full amount and still achieve some objectives.
Okay. So with this funding cycle, presumably there is going to be another funding cycle down the road.
Yes, there is. We could do it again next year, but that would have to be for incredibly short-term projects, because this funding is going to dry up on June 30th, 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the reality of it is that we'll be awarding projects and contracting this winter so we can get started spring 2016, and that gives us a couple years to finish the project.
Okay. I think that about does it short term. I'll keep looking through this and see if I have any other questions.
Okay.
Great, thank you. If you would, please press *6. We have a couple questions that have been typed into the chat box, and I'll go ahead and ask those. One is, can there be more in-kind match than cash match as long as the minimum 25% cash and in-kind match at 12.5% each is met?
I love that question. The answer is yes. As long as you meet the minimum, we're okay. But we'd like to see more match than the minimum, and that will result in a higher score in the application.
Great. And then another question is an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, needed when we submit our grant application? And I assume that's in reference to a partnership kind of watershed coalition.
The state doesn't require an MOU. We usually just defer to whatever your local group's policies are as it relates to agreements.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? If so, please press *6.
Hey, Kristen, this is Rusty. We have a question that we're getting from our organization. I thought I'd throw it out there.
Okay.
A couple of the questions that we've gotten from some potential applicants are how to handle equipment costs. Can any of this money be used for equipment costs?
Or training.
Rusty, we, of course, support training, and we've done that through you guys for a while now. So the grant can support training, although we would prefer that people attend your trainings first, and if they have a need for additional training, to let us know that it's not being fulfilled through the Tamarisk Coalition.
Okay.
Does that sound like a fair answer?
Well, it looks like Dan from RAFT is kind of getting at the same question, and I'm not sure exactly what his specific training needs are and whether those would be met by Tamarisk Coalition. I think he might have initially been talking about SAW trainings or something similar to that.
Yeah, if the trainings can't be met by stuff that you guys are doing, then we'll support it. But we're we're certainly not interested in funding the Tamarisk Coalition to do a workshop that somebody else is recreating when they could just attend yours. As far as equipment, I like to discuss that with applicants on a case-by-case basis, but I'll go ahead and say this grant's not set up to pay for any heavy equipment. Now, of course, it's there to cover the costs associated with it as it relates to the project, but we're not going to issue a grant to buy some heavy equipment, for example.
What about chainsaws? Is that heavy equipment?
Yeah, that's getting into a gray area that I'd like to discuss with applicants on a case-by-case basis. If I had to answer it, I would say no, because the chainsaws would be used for more than just the project that we'd be funding. But if we could demonstrate that the value of purchasing them is cheaper than renting them and some other things, then we could talk about it.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Sure.
Another somewhat related question that has been pushed in or typed into our chat box is, can matching dollars from BLM partners be staff pay and material costs, or does it need to be cash? So related back to one of the previous questions about federal dollars being counted as match, I believe this is asking if federal in-kind counts as well.
Federal in-kind will count as well, as long as we satisfy the minimum requirements for both cash and in-kind.
Great. All right, do we have any other questions from our attendees?
Yeah, this is Justin from Montrose County again.
Hi.
Hey. So the grant I'm looking at putting together is going to have all these components of integrated pest management and revegetation and all that. Is there something, as far as CWCB funding is concerned, do you want to see diversity in the way that the CWCB funding specifically is being spent? Or if we put it all towards, say, removal of the phreatophytes and then use some of this other funding to fund some of those other aspects of the project, is that going to be frowned upon?
No, Justin, that's up to you. As long as your match funding is secured, CWCB doesn't care if you put all of the requests to us in one task. And actually, given the short timeline for this grant program, it may be prudent to front load it with CWCB costs and then have some of the re-veg and secondary weed treatment and monitoring be the match.
Perfect. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes, this is Gary with Foothills Parks and Rec District. I have a question on the revegetation plan. On site, we have beavers, and we're trying to work with those, but can we actually use some of the funding to manage the beavers?
Yes, you can, but we would want to look at the specifics of that.
Okay.
But in the past with Reveg, we've covered caging the plants, knowing that the beavers would come in and eat $20,000 worth of plants overnight. So we would certainly consider strategies like that.
Okay, that was some of the strategies that we were looking at as far as caging and trying to painting the trunks and some of that using Mile High.
Yeah, that's all eligible.
Okay, excellent. That answers my question. Yep.
Any other questions from you, Gary? Okay. If you would push *6 and mute your phone. Do we have any other questions from the people on the call?
Kristen, this is Rusty again. I was wondering if we could just maybe take one moment to just maybe Chris and Eric could just quickly talk about the IPCP funding versus the Youth Corps IPCP funding, that there's two available, and And if we could just maybe give just a 30-second rundown of the difference of those two different fund streams out.
Yeah, not a problem. So the Youth Corps funding, in the past, what we've done is given them around like $50,000 out of the leftovers from the IPCP program. So this year we thought it would be a better idea to have them apply for themselves. So with that $50,000 that they had in the past, they do their RFP process and everything like that. And this way there's potential for CYCA to get a larger grant in order to fund the Youth Corps projects. And we would prefer that Youth Corps themselves apply for that money. And then if there are other applicants that are using Youth Corps as part of their labor, that they would apply for the IPCP stuff straight up, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks.
I had a follow-up question to that. This is Brenda Nix from Foothills Park and Recreation District. We were originally looking to apply through the Youth Corps because I didn't realize that it was available to apply directly through the Water Board. So are you saying that we can apply to both, or would we just apply either directly or through the Youth Corps?
If you're going to do it as with Foothills as the applicant, then you apply directly. But if you're going to work with a Youth Corps and have them be the applicant, then you can go through the Youth Corps process. So it's kind of up to you guys.
So is the Youth Corps funded at the same rate as the 300, or is it at the 50,000 range?
It'd be the same, 300.
They have a total amount of 300,000. So they're getting, that's why their application's on November 3rd. So if you wanted to go that route, you could call them and get an idea and say, well, how many requests are you getting? And then look at your project and what your budget is and make the decision if that's the best way to go, or if to come directly through the CWCB Grant Program is a better strategy.
And then if we did go through this, through the Water Board, we could still use the Youth Corps. We would just pay them with the money we were awarded for the grant.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Would it be, along this line of questioning, would it be fair to say that if you're applying through a Youth Corps, that the scope of work would be kind of exclusively funding crew work, as opposed to if you applied as a water conservation district, you could fund some other components of the project work?
That is correct.
Yeah, that's usually how it shakes out.
So that would be a consideration. Do we have any other questions from our participants? If so, please press star 6. All right, this is a unique opportunity to access our Colorado Water Conservation Board project supporters here. So if you do have questions, I highly encourage you to take this opportunity to ask them of Chris and Eric. But if not, you're always welcome to send those to myself, Kristen Jesperson at kjesperson@tamariskcoalition.org. I'll bring up the contact information one more time so everyone can write down these email addresses. But yes, this is, again, going to be recorded. We'll have our webinar up and available, as well as just the PowerPoint can be sent to you if you'd like to have some of this information at your disposal. And are there any kind of final points that Chris and Eric, you would like to make about this application process, or tips that you might want to impart to attendees?
Well, first I'd like to thank you guys, Kristen, Shannon, Rusty. Great job. Really appreciate you boiling down the guidance and putting it into this different format. I think that's a really helpful way to present it. So thank you guys very much for doing that. A lot of folks usually put these applications together the week or the day before they're due. which I get it. That's just the way things work. But sometimes it can be difficult to get your questions answered in a timely manner when you're staring at a deadline a few hours away. So just keep that in mind, and at least look through the application before you start filling it out several weeks in advance, so that if you have any questions, we can get an answer to you in a timely manner.
Great, good guidance. Don't procrastinate.
Kristen, this is
yes.
Shannon. There might have been another question about the size of the projects. Did you happen to see that one? Whether small segments or large acreage are preferred?
Oh, okay. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yes, I see that now. Is there a priority of the size of projects, small segments along a river versus large acreage removal on a single site?
There's no preference, but that being said, if we were to look at a small project that's completely surrounded with invasives, and we're only identifying removal in a small area, that's going to raise some questions about how effective the project may be. And sometimes that's appropriate because it's a demonstration level project and we're trying to get stakeholders interested and familiar with methodologies and revegetation. But in a lot of cases, that project's not going to be reviewed favorably because we'll just see that it'll be taken over again in short order. But given the right circumstances, we don't have a preference on the size.
And if you have those types of questions, those are the kinds of consultations that TC can help with too, in terms of looking at your specific project site and providing recommendations about what might make the most sense in terms of approach. Do we have any other questions? All right. I'm getting the sense that we may have had all of the questions asked that our people on the phone have. And with that, if that's the case, then I think we can go ahead and conclude the webinar. And we, again, will have a recording of this event. I can send the PowerPoint itself to all of you if you're interested. I put up a link for the guidance that we put together in the chat box, and there are some sample applications available through that, as well as the technical guidance materials. Also, the Tamarisk Coalition website has a wealth of resources if you have the time to pour through our resource center. So if that's a luxury that you have, then there are plenty of resources up there. And again, our staff is available to answer questions, and we are opening ourselves up to review applications between up until the 30th. But if you are interested in taking us up on that service, please send your draft application by October 25th, so we have some time to review those and get comments back to you. It should be noted that we will not be rewriting applications. We'll just be making comments on applications and maybe some recommendations. Okay, I'll ask one last time if we have any questions from our audience here. And I'm getting the sense that we do not. And so I'll thank Shannon and Rusty for helping to present today, Chris and Eric for being on the phone, and for all of the folks that called in. Thanks so much for participating, and good luck with this application process. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Take care.